with business as usual. And we have Rotus Oddiri back again in the studio. Yes, editor of Business Insider SSA. And we'll be talking about so much today on the show. Morning, Bob.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So it's to start another week. Let's start with this big talks about MTN, you know, exits tower businesses in places like Ghana and East African country, Uganda.
Yes. So a little background. MTN entered into a joint venture with a company called ATC, which is the American Tower Company. The American Tower Company is a REIT, R-E-I-T, which is a real estate investment trust. And what real estate investment trusts do, they are companies that invest in income to exiting. Doing that well. That's the reason why they are selling their stake to the American Tower Company. It's supposed to net them about $523 million, which is some good money for the company. So that's essentially what this divestment is about.
Do you think there were no other ways for MTN and other than, you know, selling these tower businesses, you know, in these countries?
Well, I mean, they could have kept them running, but then, you know, anyone who looks at their investments, you can look at your investment over a 5-year horizon, 10-year horizon. They could have kept it. I mean, the alternative was to just keep it going and see how things continue. But it was a minority stake that they held. I think they had a timeline of how long to hold it. But then their overarching strategy here is that they want to raise about $1 billion over 3 years from divesting in certain assets and investments that they hold. So this was a plan that they had
from the get-go.
From the get-go, yeah. So that's pretty much what
let's talk about the plan that, you know, I'm not sure whether they had, you know, and regards Nigeria and, you know, MTN. So it looks like the slap of the fine this easing up from the government now on MTN, right? Yeah,
that's for Nigeria. Yeah. So the Attorney General's office is they're taking the reins off that case with regards to, I think, withholding tax that was owed and also some other things. And so they are moving that to, they are having customs take a look at it. So essentially that's died. MTN made the announcement on Friday. Yeah. So that's good news for them in that, you know, they congratulated the Attorney General, said they thank him for his wisdom. And things like that. So it's
because this is clearly one of the biggest markets. Now, if they are selling out, you know, assets in Ghana and Uganda, they can't be, you know, having heavy fines, you know, and all that tax hitting them.
Right. So it's a good move for them, and it shows it's not there's some, you know, regulatory pressure has been eased up a bit on the company. So that's good news for them with regards to Nigeria. All
right, so let's move from West Africa to the southern parts of Africa in regards Eskom's new CEO, who took over the power shake-up agenda in South Africa with Eskom's new chief of a struggling state-owned utility on Monday, embarking on what we call an enormous task to fix the power sector deficits and restructuring the debt pile has really crippled the economy. That man there, under the Ruyter, you know, has been appointed by, you know, Ramaphosa back in November, and he's the man to see things through. So how effective now will it be? Where do they go from here? We know that they've, you know, gone to 3 planned, you know, format, which is generation, transmission, and distribution.
Right.
Is this the way to go?
So the thing is, it's a good step, but then it's a 2-step process. The larger question that's looming over this. So the first thing is, this man has one of the toughest jobs in the world. Regardless of how much they're paying him, I wouldn't want to be in his shoes. Yeah, because the weekend that he was appointed, they had another load shedding exercise. That's Eskom, where there were blackouts over certain parts of town of South Africa. And they said that they were going to restore power. I believe it was on a Saturday, on a Sunday. It ended up being delayed by an extra 1 or 2 days. So the weekend, the man starts to work. More people are in blackouts and they're being extended. But anyway, the thing is, for Eskom, they are looking at breaking, as you just mentioned, into 3 pieces. And so they want them to be more efficient. The question is, okay, so yes, will they be more efficient? Yes. By breaking it down into smaller pieces, they'll be more nimble, more flexible, and they should be able to, from an operational standpoint, they should be able to be more effective. However, the question is this: are those 3 separate entities still going to be run by the South African government, or are they going to be run by private hands? Because that's another thing that's been talked about now, is that Eskom needs to move into the hands of the private sector in order to be run efficiently. So you can break it down into 3 pieces. You can break it down into 3 smaller pieces, generation, transmission, and so on. But if it's still the South African government who has a history of inefficiency in running this company, yeah, maybe you're just reducing a little bit of the problem. The issue still stands. Yeah. So it's whether Eskom is going to be now put into private hands, which is a good step with this gentleman, Mr. Ruyter, or so on being.
Yeah. What about the debts?
The debt pile still remains. The question of whether or not Eskom can pay this debt back. They can if they are able to be more efficient, and those 3 separate entities can generate revenue for the overarching company. So if you can generate more revenue, the theoretical approach is that by breaking them into 3 separate pieces, if each piece is more flexible and more nimble, they'll be able to generate revenue, and that can be used to pay down the debt. But again, if the South African government is still the one running the companies, then we're stuck. But if it's not, if it's in private hands, I think they're going to private hands though.
Because now it looks like there's no bailouts, right? Because this is unlike situation if you look conversely with the South African Airways, which so far so good. We're just trying to simmer things down. It's not solved yet. The government came to the rescue.
Right. So they're not going to let them fail because of the unemployment impact and what could happen. So the government is still very much standing there. But can you make that transition to private hands and make it run more efficiently? That's the cocoa of the matter, as we like to say.
All right, serious cocoa indeed. We'll still have Rotus Oddiri in the studio. We'll take a quick breather and we'll come back and we'll go to Djibouti when we come back, still on business as usual, and look at the latest tete-a-tetes with Chinese money. All that and more when we'll come back. Right then, welcome back. Still Breakfast Central on News Central. Still in the business section with Rotus Oddiri, who's the editor of Business Insider SSA. We've looked at, MTN in Uganda and Ghana, selling out all those, tower facilities, and also looked at Eskom South Africa. The Ruyter's taken over the reins of affairs. Let's see how it goes with distribution, transmission, and generation of power. But let's come to still in Africa, but this time looking at relations with China, which looks like, are they the biggest borrowers? I'm not sure it's borrowers or is it lender, I'm not too sure. So Djibouti President Ismail Omar Guelleh has spoken highly of a potential Djibouti-China strategic partnership. Now, according to Guelleh, the Djibouti-China relationship has developed over time, yielding fruitful results across fields. Guelleh says areas of cooperation include the blue and digital economies. Okay, so which means technology. So the handshake between two, big, one big, the other. Djibouti is big as they come. What do you think of this? Chinese interest in Djiboutian economy.
China's interest in Djibouti is very strategic. Djibouti is occupies the Horn of Africa. They have the 4th most important strait, which I think is called the Babs el Mandeb Strait, which is a shipping channel that oil and gas companies use to pass through, their shipments and so on and so forth. It's very strategic. And what essentially this means is that China actually built their first port for Djibouti in the area. So they've essentially they fund about 40 to 50% of the country's major infrastructure projects. There's the Ethiopia-Djibouti water pipeline. There's the Ethiopia-Djibouti railway. Almost half of the funding came from China. China established, I believe, their first military outpost. They don't call it a military outpost. It's just a strategic post, but it's their first military outpost in Africa, in Djibouti, and I think it's caused a little bit of tensions with the United States because the United States is also there. This is essentially China gaining influence across the African region. This is essentially China using money, paying for infrastructure for countries that need it to gain influence on them. And that's the plan. That is essentially what China. It's strategic. It's not charitable. It's not anything. It's strategy. That's what it is.
So if Djibouti has this one, because we know that China has other infrastructure, investments in
across
so
Africa,
many African countries, and people are still asking why.
Why? Well, look at China's Belt and Road Initiative. It is one of the biggest and most ambitious infrastructure projects that the world has ever seen. Stretching through Asia, through Africa. I mean, I think they have a relationship with Russia where they're supposed to go through Europe. but China wants to put through one massive shipping channel that is going to just dominate the entire globe.
It's the ancient Silk Road. That's what they call it. And now it's, we're going to have it in modern times and a pathway for goods and services.
We are. And so, this is all part of their plan to gain the necessary foothold that they would need with certain African countries in order to see this through. But there are concerns. There are concerns. I mean, Sri Lanka, I can't remember when this happened. This was a few years back. Sri Lanka lost a port to China because they couldn't pay back their debts. And so the concern for Djibouti is that, look, that Ethiopian water pipeline, the Ethiopian railway, the ports that China built for them, if you're not able to pay back your debt, China takes control of all those infrastructure. So they have to really watch out with this relationship that they have. All right, let's look at some of the stories that we're going to be tracking this week. MTN again, this time in Nigeria. Yes, okay. I thought it was pretty interesting. So the announcement was made that is the Attorney General, moving back on the charges of back taxes and so on. An announcement was made on Friday. MTN stock jumped almost 6% on Thursday in the Nigerian Stock Exchange, a day before the announcement was made, right? And then the day of the announcement, stock didn't move. Nothing happened. So it does raise a few questions as to how it is that before a major announcement, this was the biggest jump the stock had seen. I think it's from 109 naira to 116, 117 naira. Biggest jump that the stock had seen so far this year. And it was just happened to be a day before a major announcement, which raises some questions as to who knew what before that took place. And then also, still within Nigeria, there was a major Nollywood movie that was withdrawn from theaters, Sugar Rush. It was withdrawn for certain reasons. Some people say it's because of the way the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission was portrayed in the film. But the film, I think it was Adesoa Etomi, she came out and said that they were trying to talk with the authorities in order to put the film back in theaters. The economic cost to a movie studio of investing in a movie, paying your directors, screenwriters, cameras, everything, putting the movie in theaters, hoping to get your money back, and then having it yanked out of studios. Now, the thing is that they might have to reshoot that plot. This is all alleged. I mean, we'll still have to get... So
who yanked it anyway? Was it the Video Film Censors Board? Or just...
the Film Censors Board said that their permit had an expired permit, which is very rich because, I mean... And we've so many movies have certain protocols you go through. The Film Censors Board watches your movie and then allows you to release it. The movie was playing for 2 weeks, and all of a sudden they just happened to realize that the permit was not it was expired. Which I don't know. So look, my own thing is that the artistic license that movies studios are supposed to be allowed to do to portray whoever they want to portray them is being trampled on, and also the costs that they are facing to have to reshoot this and put it back in theaters is something that would give a foreign investor who wants to now invest in a movie studio pause for concern.
That's really happened. I'm really...
Yeah, I'm still following the story. It's a very funny story.
I'm really puzzled. But thank you so much for coming on the show, as always. We'll be seeing you next week. Lots of business, especially when it comes to the banks and the big borrowing. After all that 30 December, how do we get to pay up the debt? Well, if you enjoyed watching this video, click here to get more of it. And don't forget to click here to subscribe.